Sarah Martinez clutched her worn leather purse tighter as the subway car lurched forward, the familiar screech of metal against metal filling her ears. The 6:47 a.m. train was packed as usual, bodies pressed together in the uncomfortable intimacy that only public transportation could create. She'd been up since 4 a.m., getting her 7-year-old daughter Emma ready for school and preparing lunches with whatever was left in their nearly empty refrigerator. Working 2 jobs had become Sarah's reality ever since her husband left them 18 months ago. The morning shift at the diner started at 7 a.m., and she'd barely make it if the train didn't hit any delays. Her eyelids felt heavy, weighted down by another sleepless night spent worrying about the overdue rent notice that sat crumpled in her purse next to the final utility warning. The train swayed gently as it picked up speed, and Sarah found herself fighting to stay awake. She'd promised Emma they'd go to the park this weekend, but she knew she'd probably end up working a double shift at the cleaning service instead. The steady rhythm of the wheels on tracks became a lullaby she couldn't resist, and despite her best efforts, her eyes began to close. Marcus Chen adjusted his Italian silk tie and checked his Rolex for the 3rd time in 5 minutes. The 42-year-old CEO of Chen Industries was running late for a board meeting that would determine the future of his company's latest acquisition. He rarely took the subway, preferring his driver and Tesla Model S, but construction on 5th Avenue had made street travel impossible. The irony wasn't lost on him that the man who owned a chain of luxury hotels was squeezed between strangers on public transportation. His phone buzzed with another urgent email from his assistant. The quarterly reports needed his approval, 3 different department heads were requesting meetings, and his mother had left her usual message about him working too much. Marcus rubbed his temples, feeling the familiar tension headache building behind his eyes. Success, he'd learned, came with a price that seemed to increase every year. As the train rounded a curve, Marcus felt a gentle weight against his shoulder. He looked down to see a young woman with dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, her head resting against his expensive suit jacket. She wore the uniform of the Metro diner, the faded blue dress and white apron that he recognized from his college days when he'd frequented similar establishments, counting quarters to afford a cup of coffee. His first instinct was to wake her, to reclaim his personal space with the polite firmness that had served him well in boardrooms. But something stopped him. Maybe it was the exhaustion etched into her face even in sleep, or the way her hand protectively clutched a small purse that had seen better days. Instead of moving away, Marcus found himself shifting slightly to give her a more comfortable position. The other passengers seemed not to notice or care about the unusual pair they made, the expensively dressed businessman and the sleeping waitress. Marcus pulled out his phone to respond to emails, typing one-handed to avoid disturbing her. As the train stopped at various stations, people got on and off, but Marcus remained still, an unexpected guardian for someone whose name he didn't even know. 20 minutes passed before Sarah stirred, the announcement of her stop filtering through her consciousness. She opened her eyes slowly, disoriented for a moment before realizing where she was, and more importantly, what she was leaning against. Her face flushed with embarrassment as she quickly straightened up, nearly losing her balance as the train braked. "I'm so sorry," she stammered, looking up at the man whose shoulder had served as her pillow. "I didn't mean to. I worked 2 jobs and I was up late with my daughter. She had a nightmare about." She stopped herself, realizing she was rambling to a complete stranger who probably wanted nothing more than to forget this awkward encounter. Marcus looked at her with kind eyes that crinkled slightly at the corners. "No need to apologize. We all need rest." His voice was warm, lacking the condescension she'd expected from someone who clearly belonged to a different world than hers. "This is your stop, isn't it?" Sarah nodded, gathering her things as the train pulled into the station. "Thank you for not waking me up. That was very kind of you." She moved toward the door, then turned back briefly. "I hope your day goes well." As she stepped onto the platform, Marcus found himself watching her through the window as the train pulled away. There was something about her grace in the face of embarrassment, her immediate concern for others even while apologizing for herself, that stayed with him long after she disappeared into the crowd. That evening, Marcus couldn't concentrate on the stack of contracts waiting for his signature. His mind kept drifting back to the tired woman who'd trusted him, unknowingly, with her moment of vulnerability. He found himself wondering about her story, about the daughter who had nightmares, about what circumstances led someone to work 2 jobs and still look like they were fighting an uphill battle. On impulse, he called his assistant. "Janet, I want you to find out about the Metro Diner on 42nd Street. Who owns it, what kind of place it is, that sort of thing." The next morning, Marcus made a decision that surprised even himself. Instead of taking his usual car service, he walked the 6 blocks to the Metro Diner. The bell above the door chimed as he entered, and he was immediately transported back to his graduate school days when diners like this had been his second home, places where coffee was strong and cheap, and the staff treated struggling students with the same respect as business executives. Sarah looked up from behind the counter, her eyes widening in recognition. She was pouring coffee for a regular customer, her movements efficient despite her obvious surprise. Marcus took a seat at the counter, suddenly feeling less certain about his decision to come here. "Coffee?" Sarah asked, her professional smile masking her confusion about why the well-dressed stranger from the subway was sitting in her diner. "Please. And maybe some breakfast. What do you recommend?" As Sarah poured his coffee, her hands steady despite her racing heart, Marcus found himself really looking at the diner for the first time. It was clean but aging, the kind of place that survived on regular customers and home-style cooking rather than trendy decor. The other waitress, an older woman named Dolores according to her name tag, moved with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd been serving coffee and eggs for decades. "The pancakes are good," Sarah offered. "Fresh blueberries today." Over the next hour, Marcus observed the rhythm of the diner, the way Sarah remembered how each regular customer liked their coffee, the patience she showed with the elderly man who changed his order 3 times, the genuine smile she gave the construction worker who left a generous tip despite his paint-stained clothes. When the morning rush died down, Marcus approached the owner, a gruff but kind man named Tony who'd run the diner for 30 years. What started as casual conversation revealed the challenges small businesses like this faced: rising rent, increased food costs, competition from chain restaurants, and the constant struggle to provide good jobs for employees like Sarah who worked hard but still struggled to make ends meet. That conversation planted a seed in Marcus's mind. Over the following weeks, he found himself returning to the diner regularly, sometimes for coffee, sometimes for lunch. He learned that Sarah's daughter Emma was in 2nd grade and loved to draw, that Sarah had been taking online accounting courses whenever she could find the time, and that her dreams extended far beyond serving coffee and clearing tables. What Sarah didn't know was that Marcus had been quietly investigating the diner's financial situation. Tony was 3 months behind on rent and facing eviction. The loyal customer base wasn't enough to overcome the economic pressures that were squeezing small businesses throughout the city. One Tuesday morning, Marcus arrived at the diner to find Sarah wiping away tears as she untied her apron. Tony had just told his staff that he'd have to close the diner by the end of the month. For Sarah, this meant losing not just one job, but her primary source of income, since the diner's steady schedule allowed her to work her evening cleaning job. "I don't know what I'm going to tell Emma," Sarah confided to Dolores, not noticing Marcus at his usual counter seat. "She was so excited about the school trip next month, and now I can't even afford her lunch money." Marcus made a decision that would change multiple lives. He approached Tony privately and made an offer that the older man initially refused out of pride. But when Marcus explained his vision, not just to save the diner, but to expand it into a model for how businesses could support their communities, Tony began to listen. The proposal was unlike anything Tony had encountered. Marcus wanted to buy the diner, but keep Tony as manager and maintain all current employees with better wages and benefits. More importantly, he wanted to create a program that would help employees like Sarah pursue education and career advancement while maintaining the diner's community atmosphere. When Sarah arrived for her shift the following Monday, she expected to spend the day looking for new employment. Instead, she found Tony and Marcus waiting for her with an opportunity that seemed too good to be true. Not only would she keep her job, but Marcus was offering to pay for her to complete her accounting degree, with a guaranteed position in his company upon graduation. "Why?" Sarah asked, the question hanging in the air between them. "Why would you do this for someone you barely know?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment, remembering that morning on the subway when a stranger had trusted him with her exhaustion and vulnerability. "Because everyone deserves a chance to rest, to dream, and to build something better." You showed me that sometimes the most important thing we can do is simply be there for someone else." 6 months later, the Metro Diner had become a model for community-centered business practices. Sarah was excelling in her accelerated degree program, working mornings at the diner and attending classes in the afternoons. Emma had started an after-school program that Marcus had quietly funded, where she could work on her drawings while her mother studied. The transformation went beyond individual lives. The diner had become a gathering place for the neighborhood, hosting community meetings and providing a bulletin board for local job openings and services. Marcus had discovered that his greatest satisfaction came not from quarterly profit reports, but from watching Sarah's confidence grow as she mastered new skills, from seeing Emma's artwork displayed proudly on the diner's walls, from knowing that a moment of unexpected human connection had rippled outward to touch an entire community. The subway encounter that had begun with a tired mother's moment of vulnerability had evolved into something neither Sarah nor Marcus could have imagined, a reminder that success isn't measured only in personal achievement, but in the opportunities we create for others to thrive. Sometimes the most profound changes begin with the simplest acts of kindness, with choosing to see the humanity in a stranger, and with the courage to act when the moment calls for compassion over convenience. As Sarah often told Emma when tucking her into bed, some of the best dreams come true when we're brave enough to rest our hopes on the kindness of others, and wise enough to extend that same kindness when our turn comes to be someone else's unexpected blessing.